Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and this is episode 7 of my series, What Gear is My Gear?, where I talk about audio gear that I use both for personal listening enjoyment and or for professional review work. And very often those two categories overlap. In this episode, we are going to take a look at this guy, the silver one. This is the Chord Hugo 2 Transportable DAC and Headphone Amplifier. This is currently just shy of $3,000 US from multiple retailers, and I will link to a couple of them in the description down below, who I have no affiliation with. I am just doing that for your convenience. All right, this little gizmo right here that it is attached to is the Chord 2Go streamer that matches this, except for the color. I got both of these units used for well under 50% of their retail value, so beggars can't be choosers in terms of matching the color there, okay? But you can get them matching. This unit here, the 2Go, will get its own review in due time, but today I want to talk about the one that you see in silver here, and that is the Hugo 2, because I have owned it for over 2 years now. I have used it quite extensively with a wide variety of gear, and it has stayed. So why has it stayed? Why do I use it for both personal listening enjoyment and why do I use it for professional review work? I will answer those questions today right after shameless self-promotion. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. I did a pretty thorough written review of the Hugo 2 back a couple of years ago, which is on Headphone, so I will put a link to that in the description down below as well. So today I kind of want to focus on, like, after now having lived with this and used it for over 2 years in a few different contexts, like I want to revisit it and just say a few words about its performance and like why I have kept it around and all of that. Okay, let's just go over the features here really quick. Nice aluminum case here. You can get an all black model too so that you can match these two. You can get a silver one of these to match the silver one of these as well, and that sort of thing. It's got an interesting design to it here. So here are most of the inputs and outputs. What we see here is we have Toslink SPDIF input here. We have a mini 3.5 millimeter coaxial input here too, which has a couple of functions. So you can plug in a TS 3.5 millimeter coax connector there and use it that way. Or you can plug in a TRS adapter here, connect 2 coax cables to it to use this with Chord's M scaler. So it will handle that kind of upsampling as well with a little adapter to plug in right there on that dual coax input. Then we have 3 different outputs. We have RCA stereo outputs there. We have then a 1/4 inch single-ended and a 3.5 millimeter, okay, 1/4 inch / 6.35 millimeter, and then 3.5 millimeter headphone outputs there on the headphone output section. Now, all of these analog outputs are wired to the same output stage. They are all identical outputs, so I understand, okay, according to the literature on Chord's website and such. And I have used all of them actually, but never at the same time. Just pick one of them to use at once. But it's nice because, again, there is a headphone amp functionality in here, and then you can use it as a DAC, as a standalone DAC / preamp, using these RCA outputs here. Okay, so then behind the 2Go here, if you pop this out, there is a USB port for charging, a mini micro USB, I should say, port for charging, and then another one for data and audio connection. So from that USB input, it will decode PCM files up to 24-bit, 768 kilohertz, and it will also decode DSD. I don't remember what multiplier of DSD, but it will do DSD. Okay, so really nicely featured. There's also Bluetooth connectivity on it using the aptX codec. This is a bit of an older unit here. I think it was launched in the year 2017. It is early June of 2023 when I filmed this, so it's a 6-year-old model, but it is still going strong, and it still just honestly sounds wonderful. It uses an FPGA in here to help with the digital analog conversion. So that's going on, and the FPGA is in front of a Delta Sigma chip as far as I know. I don't remember exactly which Delta Sigma chip it is, but like the FPGA is the star of the show here, and that's where Rob Watts, the designer of this thing, really shows off his acumen handling digital signals, because there's a lot going on in that FPGA there that makes this thing really sound good. Okay. And that sort of thing. So lots of functionality. It's got some crossfeed options on it if you want that. It's got 4 digital filters on it to influence the sound a little bit and that sort of thing too. It has this cool, let me light it up here. Here's the startup sequence, which is very bright and flashes a bunch of different colors. You can dim those lights, which you'll want to do if you're using this in a darkened room, because they can be quite blinding. I'm not sure how this will show up on the camera. Maybe it will be blinding. Okay. All of that, and then like all of these buttons are color coded for different features and meanings, and like there's a little bit of a learning curve to remember what all of the colors mean, but once you get it, like it's really easy to tell just at a glance what's going on with your unit. This is the volume control right here, that as you turn it up, it gets closer and closer to white. You see the colors of the rainbow. As you turn it down, it gets like more and more red and so forth. Okay, so anyway, I think it looks cool in that regard there too. Now, about that connectivity, let's talk about this here. The USB input, again, is a micro USB because it is a little bit older unit, so some people are not going to like that it doesn't have USB-C. Okay, I have not had any issues with the fact that it is micro, okay, in my using of it, but there is no galvanic isolation on the USB input here, and that is to make it friendly to use with a lot of mobile devices, like to connect to DAPs and that sort of thing via USB. So the USB input is susceptible to like some noise, some system noise and all of that if your USB source is not really quiet. So if you have a good DDC, or you can use SPDIF and you don't need DSD decoding and that sort of thing, I do recommend for most use cases the SPDIF inputs. The 2GO sounds really good though via USB here. So again, this is probably, because they were designed by the same company and they knew their own weaknesses of USB on this unit, I'm sure that allowed them to take care on the USB here, because the USB between these two sounds really good. Okay, all right. But beyond all of that, let's get into the sound of this thing and like the use cases and why it's such a handy unit. So the sound on this is just like, it's about as neutral gets, I would say. Like, it just has a really, like, kind of sets the standard for me almost of like what neutral is supposed to sound like in terms of its frequency response, its perceived frequency response. So there's that. It is also very incisive. There is a lot of resolution here, a lot of detail retrieval, and the detail presentation is a little bit more forward than a lot of pieces that are floating around out there. So it's a very neutral and incisive kind of sound there. The sound stage is quite big, right? It is a big sound stager on top of that, and it has really accurate imaging and separation going on within that sound field. It sounds very holographic. There's even a lot of depth to it. This was like the first really high-end DAC that I got in that showed me that, like, with soundstage and all that, if there's like a live performance going on, there's the boundaries of where the instruments and the voices and all of that could be happening, and then there's the room sounds beyond that. And this was like one of the first DACs that showed me that phenomenon happening in the recording, and that was a pretty mind-blowing moment when that happened. Okay, it's also fairly dynamic with it's got a lot of snap and like it's got an energetic sound to it too. It is not particularly robust in the sub bass though. So if you're a bass head, this isn't necessarily the direction to go. You can get, like, it's got really excellent bass texturing and resolution, and it has appropriate, I think, and accurate bass presence. But if you like a lot of warmth and just low-end rumble and some extra presence way down in the sub bass, this doesn't quite have that. Okay, but it also handles transients really well. And like, even though it's very incisive and detail forward, it still has a nice smoothness and pleasantness to it to my ear as well. The one sonic complaint that I have in terms of its own signature is it is just a little bit tonally lean. Like some notes and tones and like all of that can sound just a little bit thin. It's not really fully fleshed out sometimes. Sometimes I want just a little bit more meat on the bone with the sound on this one. So that, to my ear, means that pairing it with either headphones/IEMs or amplifiers, if you're going to use this as a DAC/preamp, is where some care needs to be taken. So if you have already like a little bit of a leaner, incisive kind of headphone or IEM, this may not be the best match. Same thing with amplifiers if you're going to use this as a DAC. I think, like, consistently to my ears, I prefer using this with warmer, thicker sounding IEMs/headphones, okay? And also same with outboard amplifiers, like the Vioelectric HPA V200 series, like my Vioelectric HPA V281, which I did an episode of this series on, as an example. Okay, that warmer, thicker sound they have really pairs well with the just a slightly lean but very neutral and incisive sound that this one is bringing with it. Tubes. If you have a tube preamp or a tube amplifier, this sounds pretty consistently good with those too. Now, it is a little bit more forgiving with IEM pairings than it is for full-size headphone pairings to my ear as well. So I really, really love it with my Focal Radiance, which was the episode of this series previous to this one. Like the warmth and the fullness and slightly thicker sound of the Radiance is balanced out by the neutrality and the incisiveness of this one, and they just sound wonderful together. There's sometimes I just listen to the combo because it just sounds so amazing together. Okay, there. But like, there are other headphones, even like from Focal, for example, that I did not think matched very well to this, like the Clear MG being an example. The Clear MG is already very mid-forward. This pushed the mid-range of that headphone forward even more to a degree that I didn't like. The Utopia sounds okay on here. It's not horrible, but I've heard better at the same time, right? Okay, that's using the amp section here. Okay, now, so that is also like one obvious use case of this thing is the transportability. Take a headphone or an IEM and just go somewhere. Okay, and it's not really an OTG thing, but it's transportable. Take it with you. You can transport it relatively easy. Use it mostly stationary at wherever you go. That's one clear use case and one reason why I keep this around. I like to take it out to my sunroom with an IEM or a headphone that's under review, or just one that I like the Radiance, and just go out there and listen for a while. Okay. But also, this thing is underrated, I think, in its use case as a standalone DAC in either a desktop headphone system or even like a 2-channel speaker system. It's got full preamp functionality in it. You can adjust volume. It comes with a remote control, so you can adjust the volume remotely and all of that too. Like, it works really great on a speaker system. I run it through a Shit Saga to get that little tube sound in there as a pre, through an Adcom GFA 555 Mark II, which is, again, like a warmer, fuller sounding amp, so it takes this sound well. That combo sounds really good as sources for as a source chain for a speaker system. Really good. So yeah, the use cases here is just an incredibly flexible device because it is still an excellent desktop or 2-channel DAC slash preamp, but it is also a very good, although somewhat, headphone picky, transportable DAC and headphone amp too. So it can cover and just very ably cover multiple use cases. And then finally, I'm going to bring up that it's single-ended only. And I really appreciate that because there are so many DACs out there anymore that are balanced, and they sound better from their balanced outputs than they do their single-ended outputs. But this is a really high-quality piece that sounds great using single-ended connections. So for review work, if I get a tube amp in here or just an amplifier that only has single-ended inputs, rather than run it from, you feed that from a DAC that I know is not as good from its single-ended output as it is its own balanced output, just use this, okay? Because it sounds great, and I get a pretty good idea of what's going on there. So I'm going to leave it there. I think I have answered the questions pretty fully about why I use this thing, why I keep it around, and plan to for the foreseeable future. If Chord updates this to a Hugo 3, which, I imagine will happen someday. I have no insider information. It's just the way these markets work, right? Okay, I imagine there will be an update to it someday. I just don't know when. Maybe I would look at the Hugo 3, but I don't know. This thing is just a really excellent performer. I will link to where you can get this case too, if you like these two together with a relatively inexpensive leather case. I will put a link down below to that. But there it is. My re-review, if you will, on the Chord Hugo 2. So I am Wave Theory. Thanks for watching. Please like this video if you haven't. Please put a comment down below if you haven't. Subscribe if you haven't. Check out my PayPal, my Patreon. Do those things you do to support YouTube channels and all of that. And as always, enjoy the music.